Hello and welcome back to the Mindful Dose podcast. You're listening to Adriana, and today's episode is The Language of Astrology Part 2. If you listen to the first part of this series, I think there will only be two, to be honest, but if you heard the first part or watched it, I briefly ran through some of the foundational languages. I ran through some of the foundation of astrology. I was trying to incorporate the word language in there, but it just wasn't coming to me. So in that first part, I just talked about the zodiac, the planets, the houses, basically what you look at when you're looking at a birth chart, and also any other terminology. Terminology was the word. Any other terminology that you might hear an astrologer use in a horoscope or just in a conversation or lecture about astrology, whatever the topic may be. So that was my goal for the first part. The second part is to further elaborate on the same thing, on the same intention, I mean. And when I prepared this episode, it seems like it's mostly going to be about moons. So unintentionally, this has become an episode on the moon, but there will be other points that we'll talk about in this episode that I think are relevant to anyone who wants to just understand astrology when they're listening to a horoscope or reading about it, or, observing a transit. So by now, those statements that I just said, that should be familiar to you if you heard and further researched from part 1. So thank you for coming back for part 2. Again, my intention is to generalize the language so that anyone who is not an astrologer can follow along. So since the last episode, I mentioned in the last episode that I would discuss the natal chart in using the system whole sign houses, which means that every house of the chart starts at 0 degrees of a zodiac sign and ends at 29 degrees of a zodiac sign. So each house corresponds to one zodiac sign. That's what the whole sign house system looks like. But since then, I don't know what happened. There wasn't a significant point. But since then, I have changed and started using the Placidus house system, which if you had told me this like a year ago or even when I started, I would not have believed you that I would be interested in the Placidus house system. Just because when I first looked at that house system, of course, I used my own birth chart to look at the house system. And when I saw where it shifted certain things in my chart, I was like, no, I don't agree. That's not true. It was such an ego opinion, motivated decision to not use the Placidus house system. But I was watching an astrologer talk about someone's birth chart and they used the Placidus system. And there was just an easy follow along as I was listening to this astrologer interpret this point in someone's chart. And I was like, you know what? Let me take a look at my birth chart again using that system. And I did, and it made more sense to me. I feel like I matured. And if you heard my episode with Dati Escobar, the Saturn return that I'm still riding on by zodiac, thankfully not by the degree anymore. I'm still maturing in other ways. So this is one of the ways of studying myself and realizing myself using a different system that shows me exactly based on. So let me just explain what the Placidus system is. I went on Google for this. It's a method of dividing the chart into 12 houses, like the whole sign house system. There will always be 12 houses. But the Placidus house system, you will notice that some houses are bigger than others. And what that means is that the the bigger houses will encompass more than one zodiac sign. The smaller houses will just be like a fragment of a zodiac sign. So there are varying sizes of houses. So the change that I saw within my own chart was that my sun sign, which is in early Pisces, is 3 degrees Pisces. And I think my Saturn is 6 degrees, but I'm not exactly sure. Actually, I might have a copy of that here on my laptop. If you just give me a moment, I can definitely take a look and confirm. Okay. So my Saturn, I'm sorry. The degrees I switched up. My Saturn is 3 degrees, my sun is 6 degrees. And it looks like my Saturn is on the cusp of the 12th house, which means that it's right at the end or the start of the house. My sun also, it's because it's only 3 degrees away, it's also on the cusp, but I think Saturn is like right there. So what that means is just that I saw that some of my early Pisces house moved into the 11th house and into sharing space with Aquarius. And I was like, no, I'm a 12th house sun. I don't agree. But again, I'm at the cusp. So any planet that is at the cusp of a house will feel that tendency of the sign that it's sharing that cusp with. But anyway, the way that the houses are divided in my chart based on this Placidus system, the transits and my life experiences and those kinds of things make more sense to me. So yeah, it was just an interesting pivot that I wanted to share with you, because I remember stating in part 1 that I would talk about astrology using the whole sign house system, but now I'm undecided. We are humans, we make changes. I'm undecided if I'm going to continue referring to charts using the whole sign house system or if I will use the Placidus house system. It's a new world. I'm intrigued. It's interesting. I feel like it's challenging me more. So what I suggest for anyone who's starting astrology is to start with the whole sign house system to keep it easy on the eyes and easy to follow along. Get the basics of the zodiacs, the planets, the aspects before you switch the system. And yeah, that's my 2 cents on the house system. Oh, actually, I wanted to go back to the Google description of the Placidus house system. So it's commonly used in Western astrology, and it's based on the time it takes for a specific degree of the zodiac to ascend over the eastern horizon, resulting in houses of varying sizes. So it's a time proportional house system of movement, and unlike systems that divide the zodiac into equal segments, like the whole sign houses, Placidus houses are of varying sizes, reflecting the unequal distribution of daylight and the Earth's curvature. So yeah, the aspect of timing is interesting to me because about the time that my Saturn return went exact, which was almost 2 years ago, a life change happened, and you can learn more about that in my episode with Tati Escobar. I'll try to link it here on the video and maybe in the podcast description. This is all still new to me, so be patient. Yeah, when my Saturn return went exact, I struggled with astrology. Because I was preparing for a Saturn return. I already knew that Saturn return was coming. I expected some challenges that were just kind of gonna bite me in the butt. Like, I was expecting it, and I felt like I was prepared. Obviously, I was not, and that's just proof. And it's just, sorry, my Saturn return story is still something I struggle to talk about. So forgive me for all the ums and buts and quiet moments. what I'm trying to say is that it sucked so much that trying to make sense of the astrology as it was happening was frustrating. It was infuriating, and the concept of time was something that I hated the most. And that's interesting because Saturn is the teacher of time. It almost brings tears to my eyes. But yes, basically, the focus on timing with this Placidus system is interesting to me now because I've returned to astrology. I thought I was breaking up with astrology during my Saturn return because I was just so angry. The one of the stages of grief, but I was so angry with Saturn, and not like blaming my life events on astrology, but it was just like reading about it was like reading my horoscopes was just like I was like, F this, like, oh, I don't care. I was an I don't care kind of period, and I didn't care so much to the point that I didn't think I would care again. But now I care again. I'm okay with astrology, obviously. So yeah, that is something that I wanted to mention just in case you hear me talk about houses and you're looking at a chart using the whole sign house system and I'm using the Placidus, or vice versa. So let me see my notes here for the episode. All right, so in the last episode, we talked a lot about. Okay, so we're picking up on where I left off, which the camera, if you're watching this episode, the camera gave me the message that I was low on battery. And I think it happened at the right time because I was just about to begin getting into the part 2 of the language of astrology. So let's begin for real this time. I want to talk about the moon. And I want to talk about the moon because it's one of the faster moving transits that you'll experience when you're catching up on your horoscope. It goes through the zodiac, the 12 signs, in like 28 days. Okay, so like a month. And the lunations, the way that they work is during the sun sign season. So let's say if it's a Aries season, the new moon will always be in that same sun sign. The new moon will be the same sun sign. So if it's Aries season, the new moon is in Aries. The full moon is always the opposite of the sun sign. So in the same example, if the sun is in Aries, then the full moon of that season is in Libra. It is always the opposite. I believe, I'm actually not even going to extend my thought out there. There could be like that awkward moment by time where it'll be 29 degrees of the sign before. So for example, well, no, the full moon is technically always the opposite sign. But for example, on my birthday, I will always use my birth chart as a common example. I just feel like it's the easiest because it's Aries rising. All my houses are somewhat in order if you're using the whole sign house system. So for example, at the time that I was born on my birthday, my moon is at 29 degrees Leo, which 29 degrees is like a don 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 kind of placement. And then in a couple of hours on that same day, it was a full moon in Virgo. So I have elements of a full moon in my natal chart when I'm interpreting it. But it's not the exact full moon, but it's right there. It's right there. So I just wanted to make that point in case you have a birth chart that is a new moon or full moon, and the sign is not the same or the opposite of the sun sign, but it's like a 29 degrees or something. It's still the lunation is still relevant to that birth chart. Whew, okay. So let's see. With the new moon, we'll start with the new moon and work our way through to the full moon. The new moon is when you don't see the moon in the sky. From the new moon up until the full moon, those are the waxing phases of the moon. That's when you begin to see the moon shine. The goals during that time of the month are to initiate things and to get the ball rolling. When the full moon comes around, it begins the process of finishing things. So from the full moon until the next new moon, it's waning phases. The darkness begins to take over the moon in the sky again. So this is about wrapping things up. So if you're just starting out with astrology, I think working with the moon is a fantastic way to get familiar with the zodiac signs, and also with intention setting, manifesting, understanding your chart. Like, you can do so much with just the sun and the moon in astrology. There was a year in my life, I work with timing, a timing technique called the perfection year. There are so many other timing techniques that I think are amazing and fascinating, and I hope to learn more. But one of the easiest timing techniques that I found for me was to work with the perfection year, which means based on your age, one area of your chart is activated. So there was a year, just recently, within the last 4 or 5 years, where my moon, my moon is in my 5th house. So my 5th house was activated. And that entire year, I just worked with the transiting moon. So the moon that every lunation of that year, I was most particularly attracted to when it came to making a horoscope for myself, or observing my life events relating to moon themes and such. So that is one way that you can work with it. Perfection years, I think, are pretty simple. You can just Google like perfection year chart, and that will pull up a chart, and it'll show you the 12 houses, and then outside of the 12 houses, it'll show you the ages. So you just like find your age, and it'll tell you which house is activated. You compare that to your birth chart. You look at that house, you look at the planets that are there, any aspects that are being made, and then this is where it gets a little complicated, and you might need some help with an astrologer or someone who is familiar with astrology. Take that year that's activated and look at the transits of that year. For example, if you're looking at 2025, you might pay particular attention to Neptune moving into Aries, if that is relevant to that perfection year area of your chart. That's something to be mindful of in the year. All the Neptune themes, the Aries energy, that kind of stuff. So going back to the moons, I think it's the easiest way to follow astrology and to really absorb the energies that a planet can reflect. I know the moon is not a planet, but just for the sake of conversation, we're just going through with it. The moon, again, is just it is about your inner world, your inner reflections of the part of you that really only you know most about. Think of it like the moon phases. You come in and out from like showing your true self, and then just returning back to yourself. You give a little bit of yourself out to the world, but you also have another side of you that only you can really identify and talk about. So that is the spiel with the moon. To elaborate, let's move on to eclipses. Eclipses are in astrology, we have them at least twice a year. The phenomenon of, oh my God, there's an eclipse, let's go outside, put our glasses on, and look at it. That is astronomically rare depending on like where you are. You might not see it, but there's another part of the world that might get that full eclipse view. So that's something that I wanted to make a distinction with. When we talk about eclipses in astrology, that happens at least twice a year, and it's not rare. It happens every year. The totality, visibility of it, that is when things can be rare depending on where you are, and so on. So if new moons and full moons happen often, like every month, right? I would say that is like a flashlight on an area of your chart, just a flashlight, right? The eclipses are new moons and full moons, but those are like staged spotlights on areas of your chart. It is magnified, it is so much bigger, and the eclipses, the moon has its own wobble as it orbits around Earth, and the highest point of that wobble and the lowest point of that wobble are the nodes, the signs that the eclipses will take place in, the highest and the lowest point of the moon's orbit around the Earth. So it takes 18, almost 19 years for that orbit to hit every zodiac sign. And because the points are complete opposites, you have to take into consideration so there's like the north node and the south node. You have to take into consideration when that south node sign is in the north node and that north node sign is in the south node. So that is the 18 to 19 year cycle. Every 9 years, we hit the same axis, just in reverse. So the north node, for example, right now, the north node, for example, the eclipse season that we just wrapped up is the Aries and Libra eclipse axis, and we're moving into the Pisces Virgo axis. So my notes are downstairs, but yeah, so 9 years ago we were on the Aries and Libra eclipse axis, but they were reversed. So the north node was back then in Libra and the south node was in Aries. This time the north node is in Aries and the south node is in Libra. And again, we're shifting that. The next eclipse that we'll have in 2025 will be on the Pisces Virgo axis, and then moving forward for the next 2 to 3 years, they will be on the Pisces Virgo axis. So pay attention to that Pisces Virgo area in your chart. The Aries and Libra axis is already complete, so it would be nice to reflect on what you have learned in the last 2 to 3 years. I know that my axis was my first and my seventh house, my first house of self, seventh house of relationships. And if you watch that episode that I did with Tati Escobar, you can pick up on more information on that with me. So again, the eclipses are like a spotlight because they're magnified. They're just magnified. So for those who are practicing manifesting and intention setting, and I don't do spell work, but if you do spell work, the eclipse season is where you're hands off. You're hands off with all spiritual practices in terms of like manifesting. But tarot cards, like energy check-in, that's totally fine. I do that. The last eclipse that we just had on March 29th, I flew out to Colombia and I was on vacation. So I was like hands off everything. And it was awesome. It was one of the best ways I've spent an eclipse. So there are solar and lunar eclipses, and that is in reference to the north and the south node. The solar eclipse, that's when the moon is between the sun and earth, and they line up. That's what makes it the eclipse. They line up on that orbit, I think. So the solar eclipse is when the moon is between the sun and earth. And this is energetically one of the most intense lunations, just because the sun, what you see, quite literally and metaphorically speaking, it's obscured by the moon. So the moon, again, is like your inner world, your inner psyche. It's all within. At first, the lessons and the themes that come up with the solar eclipse, they start within. And then when that alignment moves away and we move away from the solar eclipse energy, which can, some people say it like it could be like 2 weeks, which leads to the next lunation, unless that next lunation is another eclipse, which can happen. You'll begin to see, not just within, but out in your reality, what those lessons are kind of showing you and teaching you. All right, and then the lunar eclipse is when the Earth is between the moon and the sun. And again, in eclipse, we are just focusing on the present. This last eclipse, March of 2025, I don't know when you're watching this, but March of 2025 was pretty wild in astrology. In my personal life, the way that it transited my chart was so significant. I have a pretty strong Pisces house, and my rising sign is in Aries, so there's a lot of activity between the Pisces and Aries houses for everyone. And for me, it's pretty significant because I have planets and my starting point is there, all involved. But yeah, I just felt like it was like being on a roller coaster, and all you have to do is just like hang on tight and go for the ride. There may be eclipses that don't really affect you like the way they would somebody else. I have nothing on my Gemini and Sagittarius axis, so I don't tend to really feel so affected by those eclipses or transits in those signs. Doesn't mean that nothing is happening with me, but it's a lot less than anyone who might have like 3 to 4 to 5 planets in one sign that is being activated by the current transits. So that's something to keep in mind if you're looking at your own chart and you're like, well, not much is really, like, I don't feel so much in my life, but like my partner or my friend, they're going through so much. Just keep in mind that not much may not be happening because you might just not have planets there. Aspects are another thing. So you could have one position there, but like the aspects that it's making to other areas that are activated by the current transits, that's something to keep in mind. So yeah, and then I talked about perfection years, which is it's a sun-based timing technique. So every solar cycle, a different house is activated in your birth chart, and you just work with the themes of that house and any planets that are within that house. You can overlap that with the transits of that year that are happening. That for me, that's like my way of planning the year, or like embracing the year. And yeah, that's kind of the gist of the language of astrology. Eclipses are something that we talk about often, and often in that we talk about it every year, but the time between each eclipse can be significantly long, where it feels like, oh my God, it's an eclipse. It's an exciting time when it comes through. It's just, like I said, it's like a spotlight. So it's a stage, it's a performance, it's a show, but you're part of it. So I don't know if you were ever in a play. I was in like middle school because we had to be. And it can be thrilling. It could be nerve-wracking. But it's over. It's over at the end, and then you just go back to normal. So the new moons and the full moons are one of the easiest ways to absorb astrology, understand the zodiac signs and its emphasis in your chart. And that's kind of it, guys. The first part was a lot of information, and it's a lot of information that we have to dive into separately. But ultimately, that's all the language that you'll need to understand, to begin to understand. And you just got to dive in and start listening more and more to podcasts. I'll try to bring more astrology content. I don't really love that word content, so I'm going to call it magic. I made a face just now if you're not watching the episode. So yeah, I'll try to bring more of astrology information here on the podcast. I every day I check my horoscope. I work with the energy. It's like I don't let it rule my world. I don't let it dictate my decisions, but I do monitor it like if I was monitoring the weather. We call it an astrological report, just like the news calls it a weather report. And you just want to prepare for it properly. The way you do that with astrology, it's not like you're putting on a jacket, but for example, let's see. I can use a personal example with Venus recently in retrograde. With Venus recently retrograde, a planet is never in retrograde. It just is. It's not in, it is. So I made that mistake in the first episode. But when Venus was retrograde for the last couple of weeks, it's about to go direct on Saturday. I'm recording this on Wednesday, April 9th. During this whole Venus retrograde cycle, for me, in my 12th house, this has been a complete turnover in my beauty. I have Venus in Pisces. So the Venus retrograde was in Pisces. So it was pretty relevant to me in terms of like my finances and budgeting, and I revamped my wardrobe. I feel like I'm in a body again that I like, and I want the clothes to fit me and look nice in the way that I want to be seen, and more like a relationship stuff. So, what was I trying to say? Okay. So the way that I have been working with the Venus retrograde has been in that way. I also cut my hair, which they say, like don't do anything drastic, but I cut a lot of my hair, to just like give it a reset. And the Venus retrograde, especially in Pisces, at the very end of the zodiac sign, is a major reset. So that's how you kind of work with the astrological report, and you'll know more in time what are the activities associated with different planets and zodiac signs, especially as you become more and more familiar with your own birth chart. So those examples were relevant for me. A Venus retrograde in Pisces in the third house of communication and short travel, and siblings, that may look completely different than what I was just going through in my 12th house with my natal Venus already there. So I hope that didn't just further confuse you, but I really do believe that the more that you absorb the language, the more that you'll understand it. So take your time, try to just go at a pace that feels good for you. It's really easy to get overwhelmed with the information. On my website, and not on my website, on my Instagram, I'll share, I normally share other astrologers who deliver the information in an easy to understand format, and they don't overuse this language. But if you are on a path where you want to be an astrologer and you want to fluently speak with these terms, then I can also point you in the right direction. The astrology podcast is, I think, a great starting point. The books, if you want to pick up books, these two Language of Astrology parts will help you with understanding books as well. So yeah, guys, I think that's kind of it. Thank you so much for joining me. I would love to hear your feedback in the comments. You can rate the show. You can subscribe. You can do all these kinds of things to support the show, to let me know if you like it, if you want to see more about this, if you're kind of done with astrology, let me know. All right, guys, I'll talk to you soon.